Hi folks, I'm Matt and welcome to My Expanded Universe, a show where I go through the entire EU in chronological order as best I know how. Yep, Space Cats. Alright, so let's continue on through our journey through the Marvel comic books, and we're going to talk about 3 issues here today. The first one is issue 27, and this one, Valance, the bounty hunter that we saw earlier in the series, has returned, and he is going to take on Luke and the droids. He's going to capture them, and to be honest, he does capture them. And but I guess I have to do spoilers here to talk about the next comic book issues. He lets them go. You know, he has a change of heart. Valance, the bounty hunter who's half cyborg, who hates droids. He goes ahead and lets them go, sees Luke's cause as pretty noble, and maybe lives or doesn't live to regret that decision later on. If you recall, Valance was in that issue a long time ago when they thought they'd try to steer away from the main characters and do an issue just, you know, about a different character in the Star Wars universe, and fans hated that. You have to have Han, Luke, Leia, Chewie in your stories to make it a Star Wars story. Back then, the crowds, and myself, I'm sure, were less tolerant about stories about non-movie characters. If you were going to make a comic book called Star Wars, you had to have the movie characters in there. It was a nice attempt at Archie Goodwin to tell a different story. Anyway, I'm rambling. So let's go to the next one. Issue 28. Now this is one that's going to be a tough one to explain. Whatever Happened to Jabba the Hutt was the name of the comic issue. And in this issue, Jabba the Hutt goes after Han Solo to, you know, get his revenge. Of course, Han gets the upper hand and forces Jabba to cancel his debt. In fact, the guy who's playing Jabba the Hutt is not a Hutt at all. First off, Hutt is spelled with 1 T because back in the day, that's what George thought it would be spelled like, and then later on he changed the spelling. But it's from a character that eventually we would see in Return of the Jedi in the background. Mosep Binede, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Could be totally off on that, but I don't care. And there is a story in the Expanded Universe that this guy calls himself Jabba, and he conducts business in Jabba's name. So basically he's like a disciple of Jabba, and, you know, wherever, you know, I am Negan from Walking Dead, you know, like everyone's Negan. Well, he's Jabba the Hutt. He represents Jabba. Now this is nice, and it gave us an explanation for some of the contradictions that we saw in the Marvel comic books, because back in the day they didn't know who Jabba was. They didn't know what a Hutt was. In fact, George Lucas had no intention of continuing the Jabba the Hutt story because he went ahead and let Marvel go ahead and do some Jabba stories. Only later, when he was writing Empire, he decided to put that line in about Jabba, and then maybe eventually plan him and put him in Return of the Jedi. Remember, George didn't have this thing. I'm sure he had it, you know, penciled out, a small outline, but he didn't have it detailed on what all he wanted, hence Luke and Leia being sisters in the third movie. But at this point, he's letting them, remember, Marvel had restrictions on what they could and couldn't do. There is a lot of scripts that they sent to Lucasfilm that they rejected. Said, no, you can't do that, because that was an idea that they had later on in the series. Now, this Jabba the Hutt story is in complete contradiction with what we know about the Hutt, right? So how do we explain this? Well, I don't know if you can. I think this is one of the contradictions we just have to live with. I mean, it's true, you could make something up. Han probably knew that this, you know, Mosep Binede went by the name Jabba the Hutt. That's why he addresses him as Jabba, maybe, and then tricks him to cancel his debt, even though that guy had no intention. He didn't speak for Jabba, the real Jabba the Hutt, at the time. I don't know. It's confusing. You can't really, I mean, you can maybe shoehorn it in somehow, and I know the Expanded Universe was working toward that, because the whole idea of Mosep Binede came up to kind of fix and retcon some of the stories that were already in the Marvel comic books. But this one issue, 28, where Han eliminates essentially his debt from Jabba the Hutt because they thought they weren't going to go back to that storyline again in the movies, that does make a pretty glaring contradiction in the Marvel comic books. Now, remember, these Marvel comic books used to be secondary canon, meaning, yeah, some of the stuff happened, but not in the same, you know, not the way it worked out. And I remember, I think issue 28 as discussed in the Star Wars forums so very long ago, was one of those rare examples like, yeah, this happened, but not with Jabba. You know, it wasn't exactly like this. So I think that one remains secondary canon, which kind of is confusing, I understand, because like, well, Matt, you just said all the Marvel comic books were lifted up to see canon. The majority of them were, but of course, not everything was fitting coherently with the rest of the expanded universe storyline, and this issue is one of them. Anyway, picking up to issue 29, Valance the cyborg bounty hunter is back, and now he knows Luke Skywalker's full name. He knows who this guy is. Now, he knows also that Vader is trying to figure out who was the name of the pilot who destroyed the Death Star. This is something that's been a long, ongoing storyline in the comic books that was very cohesive. You know, Vader was obsessed with figuring out who is this guy. He's really strong in the Force. I have a feeling I might know him. You know, he's feeling like, wait a minute, did my kid live? You know, so Vader is obsessed with trying to find his name. Valance knows it, and he is going to try to stop Vader from finding out the name. Now, I hate this. I hate giving spoilers for comic books. So if you don't want to hear any spoilers on this one, bye-bye. See you next time with another video. Here we go. Valance dies at the end of this comic book. Now, for me reading it through, it was years later after the comic books had come out that I read these, and I was like, huh, okay, and moved on. But then later on, looking back over this, I kind of look at the significance of this. Here's a guy who I'm pretty sure Archie Goodwin had high hopes of making his own series on, right? It's obvious he was a big Valance fan. It's one of his earliest creations. He gave him his own book. He wanted to have his own storyline. He wanted him to be a cool bounty hunter. But I guess he wasn't winning the fan public over, or maybe Archie had to change his mind and said, kill him off. Because if you go against Vader, there's only one road you can take there, right? Death. You're not going to win against the Dark Lord of the Sith. So maybe that was the thinking of it. But again, just kind of like Crimson Jack, here is another short-lived character in the series. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to bemoan Valance and wish we had more Valance side stories. I just think, I was like, oh, you won't see that in comic books today where a person gets a few, guest star appearances and then they kill them off. Oh, and this is back in the day in comic books that when they killed you off, you stayed dead. All right, folks, that's all the time I have for now. See you next time with another video.